Amanda McLaren, welcome to my podcast.
Thank you very much, Dom. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's wonderful to have you here. I think I contacted you originally on LinkedIn about coming on the podcast.
I think you did, and at that point, I think I'd just broken my foot, so I kind of put it off a wee bit. But great timing. We've just secured the Constructors' Championship in racing, so flew back in yesterday. From
Singapore. How was that experience?
Absolutely brilliant, to be there when the team secured back-to-back championships. We didn't make it through the all-night party, which actually began at 4:00 and finished at about 9 in the morning. But we celebrated with the team and just so pleased for them. Such an amazing achievement.
You're still.
Sorry.
Oh, you're right. You're right. You're still quite involved with your dad's company, aren't you?
Yes, we are now, and I say we, myself and my husband. We're honorary brand ambassadors for both McLaren Automotive, road car side of the company, and with McLaren Racing, and also trustees of the Bruce McLaren Trust here in New Zealand. So, a great thing to be able to do to sort of perpetuate the legacy of Dad, and especially with racing and what they're achieving at the moment. Fantastic to be a part of it.
That's part of the reason why I wanted to get you on the podcast, because I'm 52, so I'm relatively old, I guess, on the big scheme of things, and I was sort of loosely aware of the connection between McLaren and Bruce McLaren and New Zealand. But I feel like, in a way, that sort of, like, I don't know, the legacy or memory, whatever you want to call it, is fading a little bit, and people younger than me may not necessarily appreciate it. So it's good to shine a light on this stuff where we can. For example, it was only a couple of weeks ago that I learned that the McLaren logo is like a Kiwi.
Well, yes and no. It looks very, very much like a Kiwi, but actually it's not. So if we go back, what was the Marlborough chevron was created by Marlborough, by Philip Moss, when they were main sponsors of McLaren Racing. When Marlborough stood away from sponsoring McLaren, they rounded off the chevron to create the shape that it now is. And it's also based on the vortex that came off the rear wing of the racing car. And so it looks very much like a Kiwi. But actually, it's not. However, if New Zealanders want to believe it's a Kiwi, who are we to disillusion them? So, yeah. And I think, back to younger people not knowing, for quite a while there, the link between McLaren, my father, and New Zealand wasn't really at the forefront of what it was they did or they spoke about. Since the advent of McLaren Automotive and Zach Brown coming on as CEO of racing, they've made a lot more of the history and the heritage. And McLaren's social media now, all the big anniversaries of Dad's achievements, birthday, death, they put something out there. And the Speedy Kiwi, which was actually my father's second logo, is actually on the Formula One cars. Took a photo of it in the pits at Singapore over the weekend. And, I mean, he's hanging on there for grim death. The cars go a wee bit faster now than they did when he was created. But Zach especially is very, very fond of the history and the heritage and makes quite a lot of it. And you walk into the pits, and anyone who's on my social media or the Bruce McLaren Trust social media will see pictures of Dad in both the hospitality, in the paddock club, and in the pits at Singapore. And if you go into the McLaren Technology Centre now, there is Dad everywhere. And the team say that they follow his vision and values very much in the team today.
How does it make you feel?
Oh, extremely proud. My father would... What would have happened to the company had he remained alive? I don't know. But to see the road cars being created very much in the same philosophy as his original prototype road car, the M6 GT, and to see his name still in Formula One, second oldest team on the grid next to, we don't use the F word in our house. It's not what most people call the F word, but I'm referring to that Red Italian team. So they've been around quite a bit longer than we have. But for McLaren still to be called McLaren after all these years, with all the changes in ownership and so on, I think is just absolutely wonderful. And Dad would be so proud of everyone there.
'Cause what your dad did was quite extraordinary, and it was only researching for this chat with you today that I was sort of aware of just what he achieved, especially at such a young age. So he was born in Auckland in 1937, so if he was alive, he'd be 93 today. Diagnosed with a thing called Perthes Disease as a child. And up until that point, he wanted to be an All Black.
An All Black, yes. Yes.
And this, what does this condition mean? Because it saw him bedridden for like a year, 2 years?
2 years, yes, at the Wilson home in Takapuna. So basically, it's a degenerative condition of the hip joint. The blood flow to the hip ball joint in the hip is compromised, and it causes necrosis or death of the hip joint tissue. And the treatment at the time was to put the children in traction. So he was on a frame, on traction for 2 years, and was told potentially he may not walk again. He overcame that, did walk again, albeit his leg remained quite a bit shorter than the other one. And so he had quite a pronounced limp, but he was told no contact sport. So that put paid to his rugby career. But his father, my grandfather, owned the garage in Remuera, McLaren's garage there. And so Dad had grown up around cars and obviously inherited a love of cars and driving, and so switched his attention to cars, which I'm quite delighted about because, you know, I'll admit it, I am not a fan of rugby. Now, had Dad been an All Black, maybe things would have changed, but I'm certainly delighted that he chose cars as his profession. But what he achieved, you know, he was 32 when he was killed, and after he established Bruce McLaren Motor Racing in 1963, he was running the team. He was helping design and build the cars, and that was 5 different types of cars at the point that he was killed. He was driving the cars. He was testing. He was doing work for other companies such as Ford and Firestone to bring in money. And so, you know, you can imagine one person doing all those jobs today. Absolutely not. Sport has changed so much. It's no longer a sport, multi-billion-dollar business. But yeah, Dad seemed to be able to just manage to do it all. And the travel. You know, they didn't have private jets and helicopters, so he was flying commercially and, yeah, managed to fit it all in.
Yeah, so, oh no, you're right.
I picked up a little bit of a lurgy in Singapore, I think.
So, he moved to England at 21 after winning a racing scholarship. Do you have any idea of the route he took? Like, what did aviation look like back then? It wouldn't have been just one stop in Singapore or Dubai, would it?
I mean, originally he was supposed to sail because it was a cheaper form of transport. Now it's a sort of luxury holiday to go from New Zealand to the UK on a ship. But he got as far as Australia, and then apparently they wanted him to fly because Cooper's had a race that he was supposed to be driving in. And so he did fly. But, yeah, it was still a long way in those days. I mean, even as a young child, I remember it was 4 stops to get to New Zealand from the UK where I was born. But, you know, what an adventure for such a young man. And to leave his home, his family, his friends, to the other side of the world where, you know, you couldn't make a call on a phone and just talk directly to somebody. And so a lot of letters were sent home, which are now part of the Bruce McLaren Trust collection. And reading through those, you know, it must have been very exciting, but also, you know, very brave, I think, back then to do what he did.
Did the letters paint a picture of who your father was?
I think they show what a close relationship he had with his father. I think his father was very much his sounding board, and often he would discuss problems with the cars or the handling, because my grandfather, Dad's dad, had been a racer himself and understood car dynamics and so on. So I think that relationship remained incredibly close over the years. Dad came back a number of times to see them. Once I was around, brought me back. And the letters do portray that close father-son relationship very much.
These are treasures, eh? And it's something that you'd only have at that point in time. I'm thinking now, like Liam Lawson, it's probably like short text messages to his dad.
Yes. I think technology has moved on in all walks of life, and now it's very, very different for the drivers, for sure.
Yeah. So your father was 26 when he founded McLaren Racing in 1963, which seems crazy. Like 26, he's effectively a kid.
Well, he is. I mean, I think back to sort of how I was at 26, and when I thought I knew everything, I did not, for sure. But he's over there, a young man from Remuera in New Zealand, taking on the established greats. What a thing to do. The audacity of him. But he had this vision, he had this dream, and he was the sort that once he wanted to do something, he did it. And I think that's what made things so special and made him a special person. And so, yes, he established Bruce McLaren Motor Racing and, went on to establish himself. Only the second driver ever to win a Formula One race in a car that he had designed and built, his own name on the nose. And his great friend and mentor, Jack Brabham, was the first one to do it. And Jack, very much inspiration. My mum said that Dad had rung Jack and said, I want to set up my own team. You've done it. Any advice? And apparently Jack said, well, if I can do it, so can you. And he did.
It's incredible. And then when he was 28, you came along?
Maths is not my strong point, so I'm just nodding brilliantly. 1965.
So you came along, and then at 1970, at the age of 32, he dies while testing a car. So you're 4 years old. What do you have any? What memories, if any, do you have of your dad?
I actually don't have any memories of Dad, unfortunately. In the March of 1970, we went to South Africa, to the Kruger National Park out there, and spent some time, and I have snippets of that, and hearing the animals and being there on holiday. I also remember the evening of June 2nd when he was killed, because I went to a friend's house, which had been the plan. Mum and Dad were going to go out with them, and I used to stay overnight with their family. But I was given a doll set. And I remember thinking, wonder why I've been given a doll set. It's not Christmas and it's not my birthday, but I was given it and I just accepted it and carry on. My mother was of the generation where children weren't really told what she deemed to be adult things and didn't mix in with adult things. So I was never actually told my father had died. And for a long time, probably was unaware that something had changed, because he was rarely at home. Racing Can-Am across in the States, racing in the European circuit in Formula One, testing cars, working for other companies. I didn't see a lot of him. But I think, my mother suffered a double loss. She was carrying a child at the time. She lost that. And a year later, I was diagnosed as a type 1 diabetic, an autoimmune condition possibly exacerbated by stress. So I think as a little 4-year-old, I picked up on what was going on at home. I didn't know why, but I think that there was some underlying acknowledgement of what was happening.
That must have been so difficult for your mum, Pat. Yeah.
Yeah. A very strong lady. She picked up and carried on, became a brand ambassador for Yardley a couple of years later. Never blamed motor racing. She always said to me, your father died doing what he loved. She, until the day she died, called everyone that worked at McLaren's, regardless of when they joined, her boys. And she said, I lost a year of my life, and then one of my girlfriends, and all her friends, her female friends, were the wives and girlfriends of the then racing drivers. One of them said to her, come on, Patty, we're going back to wherever it was. And she picked up and went back. And from then on, every British Grand Prix, one European Grand Prix at least a year, all the historic events at Silverstone. When the Goodwood events, the Revival and Festival of Speed started up, she was always at those. In that it was her life for so long, a life she loved, and it was her friends. So she continued to be a part of motor racing, became an honorary member along with Betty Hill of the BRDC, first of the women to be elected into the organisation and on an honorary basis. Excuse me. And also for some time there as senior part of the committee of what was affectionately known as the Doghouse Club, which was originally set up for the women to support each other when their husbands and boyfriends were killed. Because tragically back then it was so dangerous. The Doghouse Club, the Women's Motor Racing Associates Club, still exists today. I am a patron. And very much now for raising money for charities. Thankfully, not the benevolent fund it was for the women of drivers who were killed. There are still, unfortunately, the odd one. Not so much in Formula One these days. The safety measures that are in place are incredible. But, it says on your ticket, motor racing is dangerous, and unfortunately it still is.
Yeah, I might be missing something here, but when you say that, the last driver that I can think of that comes to mind that died was maybe Ayrton Senna in the 90s. Is anyone?
There was Jules Bianchi
right. Subsequently.
He wasn't killed instantly at the track, but he suffered massive brain damage and succumbed sometime later. So I believe he was the last Formula One driver. There have been some very nasty accidents since. I can't think of the gentleman's name, and he went to the IndyCar. But the car was absolutely engulfed in flames, and he was trapped in that car for a wee while, managed to get himself out. And then, back in the days before the fireproofing and all the safety measures, he certainly would have been killed. Yeah,
the outcomes are pretty good these days. Yeah, I mentioned Ayrton Senna just a second ago. Have you met, he was a McLaren driver for a time. Have you met many of the drivers over the years?
I've met a lot of the drivers over the years, but unfortunately Ayrton was not one of the ones that I met, but certainly possibly one of the most famous McLaren drivers, really in a league of his own when it comes to talent and ability, and certainly the one most people remember. But yeah, sadly, I didn't get to meet him.
I'll throw some names at you and we'll see if you know them or not. Alain Prost?
Have met Alain a few times, yes. Lovely chap, yes.
Mika Häkkinen?
Mika Häkkinen, yes. Met Mika quite a few times. And he's now an ambassador for McLaren, so does quite a bit with racing and automotive as well.
Awesome. Lewis?
Met Lewis once. Most of the latter ones up until sort of 2014 when we went across to automotive. I was living in New Zealand. And while I went to the Australian Grand Prix, that was more sort of the Mika and David Coulthard years. Yeah.
Did you ever meet Lewis's dog?
No.
Oh, his dog's passed away recently.
I know, that was very sad. What I loved was in the F1 Grand Prix movie, or the F1 movie, the dog gets a cameo part. Bless it. And Lewis was obviously so fond of that dog and almost wasn't going to race. But sadly, the dog did pass away. And yeah.
What about your dad's Kiwi mates from way back, Denny and Chris?
Yes, so they were good family friends. I remember growing up, especially with Denny's children, until they came over back to New Zealand, and similarly with Chris. But the children, we all met a couple of months ago when they unveiled the statue of Chris in Bulls, and we've made a pact that we will get together, the children of the trio at the top, Bruce, Chris and Denny, every year for a function or a dinner or a barbecue or something somewhere. And just, it's lovely. We're very fond of each other, and it's great for us to sort of spend that time and reminiscing and talking about our dads.
That's so special.
Yeah.
Speaking of statues, we've got one here. What's this? This is very heavy, by the way.
Yes. So
That's beautiful. That's your dad?
It is a bronze. It's a bronze miniature of the full-size statue, which is on display at the McLaren Technology Centre in Woking in England. So for the 60th anniversary of Bruce McLaren Motor Racing being formed, Mansell Rogier, the late major shareholder of McLaren, and Zach Brown commissioned the life-size bronze done by the great Paul Oz, very, very clever man. And when we unveiled that, we had a lot of plans for a huge celebration, and unfortunately, it was 2020 with COVID. But the full-size bronze is in the McLaren Technology Centre, and I was presented with this little one, which we took out to Singapore for an event that we were involved in, and it did cause quite some interest getting it through security and then onto the plane, because the case is a little bit oversized. But I have to say both Air New Zealand and Singapore Airlines were wonderful about us taking it on once they realised what it was. And all the cabin crew on the plane on the way over suddenly became huge McLaren fans. Some of them definitely were, because they knew a lot about the history. Some of them, I think, were just saying it to be nice. But yeah, it's wonderful for me to have something like this. Everything that I have has now been bequeathed to the Bruce McLaren Trust. But this one we do pick up and take with us, because it's quite a talking point and so very, very lifelike.
And so heavy as well.
It is rather heavy. Imagine I had a weight given to me for the life-sized one. You can imagine how heavy that is. But yes, this is, I think it plus the bookcase is 10 kilos.
So what do you know about your mum and dad's love story? So they met in a party in Timaru, I believe?
They met in a party in Timaru. So,
where's your mum from originally?
So mum was from Christchurch and moved down to Timaru to live with an aunt and started working down there. And mum was really rather glamorous when she was a young lady. I couldn't hear her say, well, what do you mean when I was young? She was really all through her life. She was quite a stunning woman. And she was at a party, and the story is that my father saw her across the room. And if you believe in love at first sight, this was it. Because he turned to the person he was with and said, I want to marry that lady.
Wow.
And apparently they were introduced, and my mother sort of looked him up and down. But obviously there was something there, because she says they had a courtship mainly by letter, because she was still living in New Zealand. He went back to the UK. She followed him to the UK and lived with a girlfriend over there. And then they got married in Christchurch, mum's hometown, and then moved back to the UK, of course. Being involved in Formula One in those days, you had to be based in the UK or Europe. And so they set up home there. And then 1965, I came along and was born and raised in the UK. But it is a lovely story. And I think for a young lady from Christchurch to meet the people she did, and especially at Monaco after Dad won, she went to the palace, met Princess Grace, Prince Rainier, and was at a cocktail party there. And she tells a wonderful story about they're waiting in this huge, huge foyer with a marble floor. And she calls them the boys, Dad and the other two drivers who were on the podium, got a bit bored and took their shoes off, and in their socks are skating up and down on the floor, whereas Mum and the three ladies are sitting waiting quietly.
Jeez.
And I mean, you could probably imagine what's coming. The door opens and there is Princess Grace waiting to usher them through to the party. And my mother said she didn't know whether to be completely embarrassed or what to do. Or she says, but this faint smile appeared on Princess Grace's face. And then she sort of regained her demeanour and said, please do follow me. And up through they went, my mum said. But things like that, she said, Monaco was just spectacular, and the Cannes Film Festival was sort of the week before, and so all the stars would go down. So, she's rubbing shoulders with all the film stars and just having an amazing time through until the point when my father was killed. But, yeah, she and Dad a real fairy tale story.
That's wonderful. And I believe your childhood home in London, it was called Muriwai.
Yes, it was.
After Muriwai Beach in New Zealand.
Absolutely.
When did you start to feel a connection to New Zealand? How did you end up back here, living in Tauranga?
Okay, so I mean, whenever somebody you phoned somebody and you didn't order things online, you phoned and you made the order, and they'd ask for your address, and I said Muriwai, and like, what? So, Muriwai. What's that? Oh, that's New Zealand, and it's a beach, and blah, blah, blah. At whatever age I was on the telephone at home in England. We used to come across to New Zealand every couple of years to see Mum's family in Christchurch, Dad's family in Auckland, spend some time here with them. I then left school, went training as a nurse in London, back in the days of hospital-based training, and I'm 2 and a bit years into it, and I get kicked by a horse and completely take my knee apart, like I had no ligaments left, tore off the cartilage. It was a horrible mess. And unfortunately, afterwards, I got an infection in the joint and my whole knee locked solid. So I was a year on crutches, feeling very sorry for myself. And my mum and stepdad were coming out to New Zealand. Mum had bought a townhouse in Christchurch. And so mum and stepdad would come back after my stepfather retired, time got longer and longer and longer. But he was still working at that point. And excuse me. He was still working at that point, and so they both said, why don't you come to New Zealand with us? So I hobble onto the plane with them and we come out here. And towards the end of the 6-week holiday, I said to Mum, I'm going to stay for 6 months. 6 months came and went. 6 years came and went. 26 years came and went. In the meantime, met and married a New Zealander. Moved down to Wellington, where Stephen, my husband, was based at the police college. And we've been here ever since. Well, I say ever since. 2013, we went back to the UK to the Goodwood Festival of Speed and met Mike Flewitt, who was the then CEO of McLaren Automotive. And he told us of his plans to open the 50th retailer 50 years after Dad established the company in Dad's hometown in Auckland, New Zealand. And that, of course, is McLaren Auckland. Wow. And the interest from New Zealand, albeit a very small country with a small population, was so great that for the first time they held that opening over 2 nights, not the usual one. Back in the hotel after the opening, Mike and Stephen are talking, and Stephen was being made redundant from his role with the New Zealand Olympic Committee, and Mike offered us jobs to work for McLaren in the UK. So we thought about it for a little while. We'd set up a farm in Upper Hutt, just outside of Wellington. We had 2 goats called Lewis and Fernando, after Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso, who were the McLaren drivers at the time. We had horses. I had 2 horses there, and we had grazers, liveries. And it was a beautiful home, and we'd spent a lot of time and money on it. But we also thought, gosh, what an opportunity to go and work for the company that my father founded, but automotive at that point, only 3 years old, bringing to market P1, which in my mind is the most incredible achievement and very similar to what it was my father had achieved in such a short time. So Stephen and I packed up, went to the UK. Back home for me, we lived very close to Walton-on-Thames, where my mother and stepfather still were, and spent some amazing years there until the pandemic struck. And half our job was guests and visitors at the McLaren Technology Centre, showing them around, telling the story. And the other half of our job was travelling nationally and internationally to various events and hosting guests and visitors, and again, telling Dad's story. So we were at home, we were furloughed. I was able to ride my horse. So I spent lockdown out with my horse. But Stephen had children and grandchildren in New Zealand, and we had always maintained that once both my mother and stepfather passed away, we would come back to New Zealand. And My stepbrother was the last one. He died at the end of 2020. And so we told both racing and automotive we were going to give them a year and then come back to New Zealand. And that's when they said, well, okay, sorry to see you go, but would you like to be honorary brand ambassadors? So we said, yes, okay, we'll continue to do that. And then we had to apply through the MIQ process, which I know a lot of people will understand our suffering through that process. But we got back into the country. We now live in Tupuna, just outside of Tauranga, and absolutely loving being back. Still travel a lot. We're back to the UK twice before the end of the year for a conference with McLaren Automotive, and then spending some time with racing, and then to Suzuka on the way home next year. So love doing what we're doing, but it's pretty full on. I'm going to have to blow my nose, sorry.
Yeah, no, you go ahead. We've got some tissues here for you.
Oh, okay. So sorry.
That's cool. Got the aircon and airplanes will do this to you, eh?
I picked up a little bit of a leggy on the way out to Singapore, and it's much better than it was. I mean, the hacking cough I had a couple of days, I thought, God, this is going to be dreadful, but it's not too bad.
So that must have been a really nice opportunity to get that call up from McLaren to become involved, because I'm guessing for a number of years you were just getting along with your life sort of under the radar, largely as like a civilian, just a nurse, with this hole in your heart, being Bruce McLaren's daughter, but not having any sort of connection to the company.
Absolutely right. I mean, my mother was a original director of the company, which she retained through until the mid-70s, when she was actually asked if she would sell her shares, which she did. Whether or not she regretted it, I think she did subsequently. But while we went to some races sort of as guests of McLaren, it was as guests. The family had nothing to do with the company. So, yes, I became a registered nurse. And on my badge it said Amanda. Nobody knew. And so every time we used to go back to the McLaren Technology Centre, I mean, prior to that we went to the various factories they had, but especially the McLaren Technology Centre, I mean, just an incredible building in its own right, let alone what it is they do inside. But the time before we were there, before we were offered the roles, I remember walking through thinking, I wonder what it would be like to work here. And then subsequently we did. And I have to say, for some people that work in that building, they say that they sort of get a bit used to it. For Stephen and I, maybe every other day on average, we'd meet a guest who'd been driven around the lake and then to what they called H blocks. The big doors would open and they'd come in. And you'd see their eyes out on stalks as they looked down the boulevard and saw this immense space full of the history and the heritage and the cars. And we see it through their eyes. And as we talked them through it and walked down the boulevard and through to McLaren Production Centre, we would just realise how special it was. And for me, it was just the icing on the cake, because Dad's name's still on the building. It is the McLaren Technology Centre, and every car that comes out of there has Dad's name on it. And so just that little extra bit of pride. But it also caused some mirth. You'd phone up IT, because it is the McLaren Technology Centre, but we still have problems with IT occasionally. And they'd say, what's your name? Amanda McLaren. Yes, no, not the email amandasurname.com at McLaren. What's your surname? Amanda McLaren. And there'd be this pause. And then they'd go, is that a coincidence? And I'd be like, no. Dad founded the team. Big pause. And suddenly there'd be a bit of scurrying sometimes, and then I'd get kind of their boss on the phone saying, what can we do to help sort this, Amanda? And other times they'd be just like, oh my God, really? And oh wow. And you kind of hear it through their eyes again and with their voice. And so, yeah, working there was so special. To be part of the company that my dad founded, to have, it was a really interesting, because we were staff and we told them to treat us as staff. but a lot of them didn't. And we got little perks. And my ID card, everyone else had the sort of passport photo picture on it. For me, they put the picture of me in my dad's N6 GT, the prototype road car, when I was 4 years old. That was my picture. And just really sweet things like that used to happen. But yeah, to see automotive grow from being a tiny little company when we started through to what they were doing when we left was just a phenomenal thing to be a part of and to experience. Really was special.
Yeah, this technology centre that you're talking about, I've seen photos of that online and some YouTube videos. It looks impressive.
It really is, to the extent, when some of these films, I mean, it was used in the F1 film, but previously there was a sci-fi, and sci-fi is not my thing, and I apologise, I cannot remember the name of the film, but they use that as the headquarters. And it is the most incredible piece of design and engineering, and the Formula One team actually helped make some of the structure of it, the load bearings, parts of it, because that is part of their expertise in terms of building a Formula One car. And it really is quite spectacular. And it was Ron Dennis's baby, his concept, and what a legacy to leave. He says he was a chapter of McLaren, Dad the first, he really the second, Zach and automotive now the third. But yeah, just a fantastic building. It really is.
So cool. When did you lose your mum? When did she pass away?
So, and I hoped you weren't going to ask me that, Stephen. What year did Mum die? Oh,
He said 2016.
thank you. So we lost Mum in 2016. I was in the UK. I'd been there for 2 years. She'd about 5 years previously been diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer and had been given 6 months without chemo and 18 months with chemo. And I said before, a very strong, tough, feisty lady. She had the chemo. While she lost her hair, it didn't make her feel unwell. We still had our pub lunches and our wine. My mum loved her wine. For anybody that knew Mum who might be listening to this, yes, she loved her wine. And we had a very special 2 years, knowing that she was ill, but at the time still having the time of her life. And so we go out on a Monday night with what she called her Monday night girls, and I'm still closely in touch with them and see them every time I'm back in the UK. And then Tuesday, I take her shopping. We have mother-daughter lunch. And McLaren Automotive wanted me to talk to her and get the stories that only she knew. And so I was able to spend that time and actually get paid to talk to your mother, which was quite surreal. But we had some lovely moments, and I did learn quite a lot of things that previously sort of I didn't know.
Yeah.
And it was just wonderful to spend that time together. And she was great, really, until unfortunately she fell and broke her hip, which is what is the beginning of the end for a lot of the elderly.
Yeah, having a fall.
Having a fall is never good. And while she was still able, she got around in a wheelchair after that, and just sort of walked the short distances from the flat that they had to the car, and then from the car to the pub. We still managed to have some amazing times, and then she was admitted to hospital, and thankfully within 4 days she'd passed. So, yeah. But just so good to have been there and not got the phone call from my stepfather from the UK and had to kind of maybe go backwards and forwards a few times, sort of thinking, God, am I going to get there in time? So it was fantastic to be there and spend that time with her.
Can you remember any of those stories that you got from your mum that surprised you while you were curating your dad's life?
Well, yes. I mean, it wasn't until then that I learnt that she was carrying a child when she lost my dad. But also the colour of the house, Murawai. So it was painted white, brick painted white, with blue front door, garage door, and blue shutters in the Georgian style. And I said to her, why? And she said, and this surprised me slightly because my mother, she was a little bit superstitious, but I didn't think she was quite as superstitious as this. But she said, I was at a party and there was a fortune teller there and she read my palm and she said, you will have 2 children and you will live in a large white house with blue. And she said, I always kind of wanted a white house with blue. And I said, yes, but you didn't have 2 children. And she said, yes, I did. And that's when she told me that she'd lost a second baby. So those were sort of the 2 things. And I have to say I took that afternoon off. I didn't go back into work because I was quite sort of surprised, stunned, and very sorry for Mum because I realised then she'd not only lost my dad, she'd lost a child as well.
Yeah, it must have been impossibly difficult for your mum at that time, right?
Mm-hmm. It was. I mean, she didn't have any family over there in the UK. She had a lot of friends, and I think they rallied around and looked after her, which I think was again, those women were part of the Doghouse Club. They'd seen so many of the husbands and boyfriends killed that they kind of knew what to do for each other, I think, which was dreadful in one way, but at least they had each other. And some good neighbours as well that certainly spent a lot of time looking after me. So I remember going to Portugal with our neighbours who were very, very good friends, I think, just to give Mum a break so she could have some time. And then she came out here for Dad's funeral. But again, very much on her own. But, the strong lady, very strong. And, she talked about it. It was always a little bit upsetting for her, but she'd always pick herself up and dust herself off and carry on. And, a very, very... I think the pair of them were quite formidable in terms of not being frightening people, but very determined people. And if they wanted something, and I think that's what made Dad so good at doing what he was doing and, got Mum through those years. Yeah.
What traits do you have that come from your mum that you'd know firsthand, and what traits from your dad? Maybe your mum said over the years, your father would say that or your father would do that.
I think I got my dad's short, stumpy little legs. I definitely look very much like him in that I hadn't seen Chris Amon for maybe 15 years, and we went to visit him in Bulls, and I walked into his lounge and he looked at me and he went white and he said, oh my God, it's Bruce. I don't have my father's stamina, how he managed to do all he did, and he could sleep anywhere apparently. Now I can sleep anywhere, but if I don't get 8 hours, I get very tired, and when I'm tired, I get grumpy. And yet people say they never heard my dad speak a short word to anybody.
Wow.
He never lost it. He never tossed his toys out of the cot. How he managed to do that, and when I'm sort of feeling, I think, be more Dad, be more Bruce. Mum managed to sort of smile at everybody and carry on. And sometimes you see her gritting her teeth, and I think, I'm sure sometimes people can see me grit my teeth. But I think they were both people. And while I'm an introvert by nature, when I have to be sort of out there, I'm sort of a combination of Bruce and Patty, and I draw on that sort of strength to be able to do things maybe you don't necessarily choose to do or want to be doing at that moment. But McLaren, and Mum's maiden name was Broad, that spirit, and just, Mum brought me up with manners and with, be nice to people, and I think that's a very good lesson for a kid. And so I'm grateful to both of them for what it was they did.
Well, was it hard for you growing up without a father?
I think for quite a while, because it was a gradual realisation. In that sense, no. In that Mum had a lot of male friends and not taking this the wrong way, at my age, everybody who was older than me was either aunt or uncle. So I had a number of uncles that were very good to me and sort of did, one put me on the back of his motorbike and would do that sort of a thing. And then my mother had a long-term steady boyfriend for a long time who I grew up, who really was quite a father figure to me. And then she remarried when I was 15. And Douglas, my stepfather, for a man who hadn't had any children and kind of took on me at the age of 15, he did incredibly well. And over the years, our relationship grew stronger and stronger, which is why Stephen and I decided we would stay in the UK while he was still alive. And so there were good, strong male figures in my life as I grew up, which I think certainly helped.
Yeah, filled the void a bit.
It did. But I also think, growing up without a parent, and especially because of a traumatic death that seriously affected the remaining spouse, obviously has an effect on a child. And I think over the years, sort of looking back at the personality, maybe I developed as a shield to some of my mother's trauma that I wasn't aware of. I've done a lot of reading about fatherless children, and also Mum tried her best, but sometimes was quite emotionally absent, and that certainly has effect on children, for sure.
Can you remember your mum telling you about how your father passed away, like what age you were, or was it something that just sort of gradually seeped? Really?
She never really did. She spoke about the accident, but that was sort of in general terms, never about how your father died. So I was never actually told. What I did learn was through books and film.
So you just sort of slowly pieced it together as you were old enough to absorb the information.
Yes. Which I think, which is better or worse, I can't say, because I was never told directly. There was never that sharp emotional shock, but sort of layer upon layer perhaps sort of grew upon me over the years. But what happened, and I've come out reasonably okay the other end.
Well, it's just how parenting was at the time. It was very secretive, eh? Like
it was very, very different. Children should be seen and not heard.
Yeah.
And it took me 25 years to learn to talk to somebody older than myself, because it just wasn't how it was back then. And children didn't go to dinners, they didn't go to funerals, they didn't go to adult things. And that was the time they were at the age they were when they had me, and how they'd been brought up. And so, I don't blame my mum for the way she did it. She did the best she could. Yes, with hindsight, some of it was definitely lacking. But she didn't have a good role model as she grew up. Her mother had died when she was very young, and she didn't particularly get on with her stepmother. And so, she did the best she could with the tools she had. And,
Yeah, also, just how parenting was at the time. Even with adoptions back then, it was all closed and shrouded and sort of secretive.
Yes.
It was just how it was. Yes. What kind of stories did your mum or others share about Bruce as a husband and a father and a man as you were growing up?
Well, I look back at the pictures of me, and a lot of them with him, a lot of them are quite staged in that they were often promotional shots. He was at home. They wanted the family photos. But he's playing with me on this. We had a little swing slide set at home in the garden at Muriwai, and he's out there with me. And he's always just got this beaming smile on his face, and he's really engaging with me. And then there's other pictures of me sitting on a tree stump in a big park outside of London where we used to go, because I love anything with four legs. I say it's got to have four legs or four wheels. And there were deer in this park, and there were horses, and one of my first words apparently was pony, and I never grew out of loving ponies and horses. And he'd take me there, and just the look on his face when he's interacting with me. I think he was a really doting father, and he just loved spending time with me when he could. And people say what a lovely man he was. The afternoon he was killed, everybody who was at the factory was told to take that day and the following day off as a mark of respect for him. And they all defied orders and went back in. They said, Bruce wouldn't expect us to take the day off. We want to build cars and win races, just as he was wanting to do. And we're all back here for Bruce. And there are still some alive today who worked with him. And they say, we didn't actually work for Bruce, we worked with Bruce. And Howden Ganley, New Zealander, who was one of Dad's early mechanics, great family friend, said, if Bruce had asked us to down our tools and go out to the desert to build a brick wall, we all would have done that. No question asked. He had this innate ability to inspire people and be a great leader. And I did a Master of Nursing Leadership, learnt some tools and things like that through that course. But he did it without any formal instruction or people telling him what to do. It was just an incredible ability he had. And I think that's sort of the person, as I grew up, I wish I'd known better and learnt some more of those skills and traits from him, for sure.
Do you remember what age you were when you realised your dad was this special, larger-than-life character, not just Dad? Like your dad was like a VIP?
And I do, and the reason I'm laughing, so as I grown up, we used to go to the British Grand Prix, and I'll be honest, I would run around the pits pretending to be Pony jumping over piles of tyres. I mean, that would not happen today because,
no way.
One, you just can't get out into the pits, and two, it's far too dangerous for kids to be doing that sort of thing. But that is what I did. And really, there's a few pictures of me with sort of Emerson Fittipaldi and various drivers. But 1976 comes along and a driver called James Hunt signs for McLaren. And James Hunt's quite the pin-up boy. James Hunt's really rather gorgeous. And a lot of young women had him on their bedroom wall as their pin-up, not because he was a racing driver, just because he was really rather good looking. And so I go to the British Grand Prix in 1976 and I get to meet James and big wide eyes and I'm like, wow.
So how old are you at the time?
So I'm 10.
Oh, yeah.
So I go back to school the following morning and we're doing the what did you do over the weekend? And I tell you, if you want to go to from zero to hero in the popularity stakes, if anyone met Oscar or Orlando over the weekend and they're 10 years old and they go back to school and they tell their classmates, similar sort of thing. All these girls turn and pivot and look at me and say, you did what? And I said, I met James. And they said, well, because I was Amanda, they were Susan and Tina and Natasha and Sally. And again, we just ignored each other's surnames because they weren't important. And so they're like, well, how did you get to meet James Hunt? And I sort of drew myself up really proudly and said, well, he drives for the team that my father founded. And so they look at me and they started asking me questions and I couldn't answer any of their questions. Oh, well, yeah, Dad came from New Zealand. When did he found the team? No idea. So I went home and I thought, Mum gets motoring news every week. She gets motorsport. She gets these magazines. And I kind of had a look at them, but I wasn't particularly interested. And then I had a look at all the books in her bookshelf. They had a big trophy cabinet and bookshelf underneath that had been made. And I'm like, ooh, Denny Hulme. But that's the man whose bonfire night thing we went to. And Chris Amon and Jackie Stewart and Graham Hill and Jack Brabham. And these are all Mum's friends. So I'm like, ooh. So I start reading and I start asking a few questions and then I start keeping a big scrapbook and I wish I had it. I don't know what happened to it. Of the rest of the season between 1976, James Hunt, Niki Lauda, McLaren versus Ferrari, the good old rivalry. And it was really from then on that I started reading and following Formula One, following the McLaren team. And it was a real, penny drop light bulb moment. My school friends asking me about James.
Oh, that's so cute. That's the greatest story ever. How cool. I've heard and what I've read about your dad, he's been described as like humble and brilliant. How did your mum and family describe him to you?
Similar, I think. I mean, everybody says he was just the nicest person. He just was innately nice, which I think is a fabulous thing for a child to have in a father. And it still continues on to this day. You know, you've got men who went through the war, the Blitz, went through seeing people killed regularly in motor racing, and yet they all, and boys don't cry, the stiff upper lip, especially for the British, and talk about sort of, you know, parental upbringing in generations. Boys do not show tears, especially from that generation. They all cry when they talk about June 2nd, 1970. My dad had such an effect on them, and his death still does. And so you just think, gosh, and you try to nail it down what exactly it was, and they're lost for words. They can't explain what it is that actually had that huge effect, but he did. And so again, to see that and just think, you know, he must have been incredible. Not just what he did on paper or on the circuit or forming the team, but the man he was underneath that.
Yeah, knowing that, does that make it even more bittersweet for you, growing up without him? You know, knowing that he was such a nice man?
I think it does. I mean, you know, had everyone said, oh, he's a grumpy old so-and-so, and you probably, it would have been maybe easier. But, you know, you can't undo what happened.
No.
No point looking back. The legacy lives on. You know, I'm really proud to sort of be a part of that, to see McLaren still out there, you know, back-to-back Constructors Champions last year and this year. So, you know, if we can't have Dad, we've got the second best thing.
Yeah, and your mum did an incredible job, and now you're doing an incredible job, keeping this name alive, which I think it's really cool. So not just the name on the car, but the Bruce part as well.
Well, my husband and I are two of the 4 trustees of the Bruce McLaren Trust here in New Zealand. It is a New Zealand-based charity with the aim of perpetuating the legacy and the history of Dad. We are supporting 2 scholarships for students from the Faculty of Engineering at Auckland University. Well, my father started his undergrad degree. He never actually finished it, but he started it. And the students go to the UK every year, one to McLaren Automotive, one to McLaren Racing. We also support their Formula SAE team, and the launch of their 2025-26 car is tonight, so we're going to that. And also the Bruce McLaren Intermediate School in Henderson. And it's a low decile school, but we would like to offer children there some opportunities that maybe they wouldn't have had before. So again, students from their STEM program go to the University of Auckland and have a look and see what it is they do over there. So that's wonderful for us. And despite the fact that Dad didn't finish his undergrad degree, the university, not last year, the year before, 2023, awarded Dad its first posthumous honorary doctorate. And I accepted the award on his behalf. And so our links with the university and what they're doing over there, they're working on an exciting new project, which unfortunately I'm not able to give any more information about yet, but something that will have Dad's name attached to it, which is just going to be fantastic. And so we're actively sort of promoting that at the moment. And the trust is doing more work with McLaren UK. Zach Brown, CEO of Racing, is one of our patrons. And so just making that history and legacy stronger. As you mentioned earlier, not everybody knows that Bruce was a Kiwi boy from Remuera. So we're trying to sort of address that more with our social media presence, and we put out a newsletter. And so, McLaren are doing great, and it's wonderful to be a part of that story.
For sure. Well, you're the only person that can do it. It's on you.
Well, other people could do it, but they just wouldn't be able to say they were the daughter. But you know, I mean, in the future, you know, I'm not going to be here forever. The trust will hopefully live on. We'll have new trustees coming on board. But what we're trying to do is put in place things that will just continue fairly easily, like the scholarships and so on. And long may McLaren Automotive and Racing last for sure.
If Bruce McLaren was here today, how do you think he'd feel about the team, the brand, and just the state of F1 and motorsport in general?
I think, firstly, he'd be so proud that the team has continued on in motor racing, as I said earlier, second oldest Formula One team in the history of the sport. You know, they could have had a name change over the years for a while there. There was a single owner of the team who could have named it after himself, but didn't. And to be doing road cars now as well, you know, that was the next big plan for Bruce McLaren Motor Racing. Had he not been killed, road cars. So Automotive are doing what he would be wanting to do. Formula One, I think my dad was very much an innovator, created first nostrils on a Formula One car. They use now widely across the sport. Wanted to use something lighter and stronger to build the cars off, so took malite from the aerospace industry. Now they're using carbon fibre. He would love the technology. He'd be amazed by, I think, the progress and how quick things have changed, the access to new materials, so things like 3D printing. But he would just be so immersed in it and just looking for the next best thing that would enable him to build lighter, quicker, stronger racing cars and road cars.
Do you reckon he'd be a fan of Drive to Survive? Are you a fan of Drive to Survive?
I mean, it's a little bit contrived, and they did, you know, who's the goodie, who's the baddie. But I think it has been absolutely brilliant for the sport in terms of getting young fans and especially young females interested. We've met so many women who are now following Formula One because of that series. I think it's done an absolutely brilliant job.
What about the F1 movie? I had Greg Murphy on the podcast recently, and he refuses to watch it. He said, "No, I'm not watching the Brad Pitt movie. It's ridiculous."
I'll be honest, I went with a degree of scepticism. You know, how can you have this sort of 50-something-year-old Formula One driver? However, I came away quite impressed. One, Brad's not bad for an old guy. And two, they do make a joke about the age of him in the movie. You know, how can you be a Formula One driver at your age, sort of thing. So they address it really quite well. And I have to say, some of the racing scenes are spectacular. The seamlessness between the real thing and Brad and his co-driver and what wasn't real, you can't tell. And I actually think, again, in terms of fan engagements and just a little bit of what's behind the scene, I mean, yes, it was probably a little bit sort of more contrived than in real life. However, I really enjoyed it. So Greg, I mean, he's one of our patrons too. Go watch the movie if you're listening to this. He's probably not. He's doing his thing. But it's worth seeing. It's a bit of fun. And it is a Hollywood. It's not a documentary. And it's the same with Ford versus Ferrari. You know, it was a Hollywood. It's not a documentary. So, you know, the differences are there. And on that note, we are actually going to make a Hollywood about my father. I'm working with a company who are doing that. But we're going to make sure it's not quite so contrived. What we're going to do is explore the relationship between my father and Teddy Mayer, who was his business partner. Two very, very different characters, but one of the greatest pairings in Formula One history to create Bruce McLaren Motor Racing and what it became. And so, Hollywood films, I mean, Hollywood in inverted commas, but they're not always bad.
No. Well, there's a bit of creative license, isn't there?
Absolutely,
and that's fine.
absolutely.
That's fine. Wow, who's going to play your dad?
Absolutely, no. We're not quite at that point yet.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is, you know, it's got to be a fairly young actor because, as you say, he was in his 20s when it all happened. So, we're not quite at that stage yet.
Yeah. Another guest I've had on the podcast, Sir Peter Beck. Do you know who Sir Peter Beck is? Started a company called Rocket Lab.
I don't know of Rocket Lab. Yeah.
There's completely different sort of things, but I can see parallels between them. Like Sir Peter Beck, a kid from Invercargill, never went to university, couldn't get a job at NASA, so thought he'd build rockets himself. Just in terms of the innovation perspective and punching above your weight, there's definite parallels between Sir Peter and your dad.
Absolutely. I mean, in terms of almost everything, New Zealand punches way above its weight, whether it be in the arts or sport. But I think a lot of that comes from the fact that back in the days of Sir Peter and my dad, if you wanted to do something, you kind of had to do it yourself.
Yeah.
You couldn't get it on Amazon or eBay or the internet or get on YouTube and kind of see how to do it. And that made Kiwis very ingenious. And the number 8 piece of number 8 fencing wire mentality. But, that real entrepreneurial sort of spirit, and that again is something the university's going to be working closely on with this project that we're involved with, and just creating leaders for the future with that Bruce Kiwi spirit.
Yeah, as the trustee, what project has meant the most to you personally? Is there a standout?
Probably getting the university students to McLaren racing. Automotive had been set up when we were still in the UK and was happening, but I think racing saw the benefit to automotive, and the trust wasn't supporting the scholarship at that point. But for a young student to have the ability to go over, and for a long time, I think everybody thought it would be a one-way street from racing or automotive to the student. But no. One of the last students that went over working with racing, they were talking about a problem that they had. And this student said, I think I can help you with that. And he came up with a solution. And racing were just absolutely blown away by the creative thinking. And I think that's the thing with young children these days, or young students, the ability to not be constrained by sort of the ideas and the environment that they've been in. They think outside the square. Way outside the square, and come up with all these ideas. And for the trust now to be supporting that with the New Zealand UK Link Foundation is, I think, a wonderful thing for us to be doing with Dad's name attached to it. And it's just such a wonderful relationship, and a number of the students who went over with the internship are now working for racing or for automotive, and or some of the other Formula One teams or other similar type industries. So they're really having a wonderful experience, and that they're all so thrilled to get the internship. We've met a lot of young students who were looking at other universities around New Zealand and said, can we have it at Waikato? And we're like, sorry, this is the University of Auckland because it's Dad's alma mater, but they choose to come to Auckland and the School of Engineering for that reason, so that they're eligible to apply for the internship.
Obviously, you feel a huge sense of pride when you see your name and your family name on cars, or you see a glimpse of it in the F1 movie or whatever it happens to be. But do you ever, are there ever moments where you sort of feel his presence, do you think?
I'd like to. I think, I don't know. It's a hard question. In that sometimes, he's all around, because you walk into the McLaren pits and there's a huge photo of him, and you walk into the paddock and there's a huge photo of him. So he is kind of there. So whether it's through the pictures or just the name or the feeling, or I don't know, but I would like to think he is there, sort of supporting everybody and giving them a little push sometimes. And yeah, interesting question.
Thanks for that answer. That's such an honest answer, because I think anyone that's lost a loved one, you'd like to think there's something, but maybe there just isn't. Maybe it's just the memory.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not religious. However, I know a lot of people do believe that spirits live on. I don't know. But in terms of just sort of carrying forward the DNA of mum and dad and their mums and dads and their grandparents and parents, I think that there's a little bit of everybody in us. So in that sense, sort of, I feel there's a bit of dad with me. So he's kind of with us all the time. But it's it's something I really don't know the answer to.
What's been your proudest moment as his daughter?
Oh my goodness. Proudest moment. I think in terms of receiving something on his behalf or him being acknowledged, the honorary doctorate would be up there, in that he was recognised as an engineer. Most people think of him as a racing driver or the founder of the team, but for the university to recognise his contribution to engineering, I think was wonderful. And for it to be the first honorary doctorate. Until that point, the university had never awarded an honorary doctorate. And they changed the rules for Dad to be able to receive that. So what they did and how special they must have thought Dad was to be deserving of it was incredibly heartwarming. And we had a wonderful ceremony, and they gave me that. So that's probably one of my proudest moments.
And when people think of Bruce McLaren, what's the one thing you hope they remember most?
I think everybody will remember something different.
Yeah.
But I think the people that knew him, actually really knew him, remember the great person he was and the lovely person he was. And they tell me stories of, Dad paid for one of his mechanics to go on honeymoon in Fiji. Team was doing well and he had the money and they didn't, so he paid for that. Just a lovely, generous, kind-spirited sort of man. Others remember him as creating the race team and how fantastic that was. Winning Can-Am, the 5 championships back to back, being so dominant, creating the cars that achieved that. So different people remember him for different reasons. But yeah, I like to think the people that really knew him remember him for the sort of person he was.
Yeah, that's so special. And what about you? When people think of Amanda McLaren, what do you want your legacy to be?
What they think of me is probably something different to it. I think that's twofold. I was a registered nurse, and at times you're there at a really low point in somebody's life, and if I made a difference for some people in that part of my life through that journey as a nurse, then that is incredibly special. Completely different life now as honorary brand ambassador and trustee and sort of perpetuating Dad's legacy. But I think the things that the trust has set up, and that's not just me, that's my husband and our other 2 trustees, Michael Clark and Warwick Mortimer. But the things we've been able to do, I think, are a great part of my dad's legacy. And so to be a quarter of that has been incredibly special. So it depends what part of my life we're talking about.
Your dad never got to know the woman that's sitting in front of me today, but yeah, what do you think he'd make of her?
I hope he'd be proud. I try to live by the 4 agreements, and one of them is just do your best. And sometimes it's not as good as it could be because I'm tired or I'm not feeling well, but always just do your best. Be nice to people. You sit in a restaurant or you sit on the plane and you hear some people being really rude to the staff. And, people say, the measure of a man is how he speaks to the waiting staff. And it's like, yeah. And so I think, I'd like to think Dad would pat me on the shoulder and say, good job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's nice. I think that's a good place to end it. Oh, one more thing. If you're watching F1 on TV and no one else is around, do you ever root for Liam Lawson?
He doesn't drive from McLaren.
I know, but you're a Kiwi.
I'm a Kiwi. What I said before this weekend was that McLaren first and second, so we absolutely clinched the championship, and Liam can be third. Once the driver championship is sorted at McLaren, maybe Liam can be second. It is lovely to see a Kiwi driving in Formula One again. And so, I wish Liam all the best and for his future career, whatever happens next year. But it is lovely to see a Kiwi out there.
Yeah, well, Amanda McLaren, thank you so much for coming in and being on my podcast today. I really appreciate it. It's been really nice to meet you and really nice to get these little insights and learn more about your dad and the amazing man that he was.
Well, it's been fantastic, Dom, and thank you for having me here. I've really enjoyed talking with you.